All right, so welcome everyone back to the deep dive. And today, we're taking a look at some recently released documents about the assassination of JFK. I mean, it's been decades, and people are still asking, what's the government still hiding from us about this huge event? But thankfully, because of the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Act, the one from 1992, we are getting more pieces of this puzzle, little by little. So our mission in this deep dive is to go through these documents, these new revelations, and really try to understand, what was so sensitive about JFK's assassination and the things surrounding it that they felt the need to keep it hidden for so long.
Exactly. We have quite a collection of really interesting material here, for the listener. It's kind of a peek behind the curtain of government secrecy. So among the documents, we have what are called transmittal slips. These are basically just records of how material has been handled. And these slips, they refer to something called, quote, HMMA, end quote. And HMMA is followed by a number of different numbers and dates, stretching from 1975 all the way to, projected entries as late as 2025. And there are also, memos and other types of communications that detail, specific operations, intelligence operations, as well as individuals who were active during the Cold War. And some of these documents are marked as, quote, secret, end quote.
Okay, so let's start by looking at this HMMA designation. We see HMMA 1975, then a whole range from 2006 to 2022, and even incoming Monterey for HMMA 2024 and 2025. And some of these entries are marked as, quote, complete, end quote, which makes you think that they're closed, done. But others are marked incoming, meaning they're still being processed or reviewed. I mean, what could HMMA possibly stand for when it comes to, JFK assassination records? They track it for so long, there's ongoing tracking. I mean, it's got to be important.
Well, that's the real mystery, isn't it? You see, the documents themselves don't actually say what HMMA is. It could be, I don't know, maybe a code name for a project that has to do with the assassination and its aftermath, or maybe it refers to a specific person, someone whose story is still important, right, or location, a sensitive location, or even just a category of classified documents that they have to keep an eye on. But the fact that this HMMA thing is being tracked for decades, after the assassination in '63, it makes you think maybe it has something to do with how the event played out, long term. Maybe there are people who were or still are persons of interest, or there were some sensitive issues that came up after the Warren Commission, did their thing. So for you, the listener, what this really means is that the government's interest in some aspects of the Kennedy assassination, it wasn't just historical. It may have had some long-lasting effects.
And here's where it gets really interesting. So besides this mysterious HMMA, we also have some documents that talk about some very specific surveillance activities. For example, one memo is about a man named Ramon Joseph Alvarez, and he was recruited way back in March of '55 to be part of a what they called a station unilateral surveillance team. Now, for you, the listener, that probably means a surveillance unit operating on its own under the direction of a specific CIA station. And later on, Alvarez became a contract agent with an annual salary. And his main job, starting in late '56, was to take photos of the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. And they even had code names for the spots they used to watch the embassy. They called them Limited, Lee Lyric, and Lacala.
And what's really important about Alvarez's work, for the listener, is that there's a note that says a photo of Lee Harvey Oswald was taken from the limited base house. So there you have it, a direct connection between intelligence work before the assassination and the man who would be identified as the assassin. So the fact that they might have had Oswald on film before the assassination even happened, I mean, it raises some big questions about what the agencies knew about Oswald and when they knew it. I mean, you have to wonder, was this information intentionally kept hidden, and if so, why?
Oh yeah, and it goes even deeper. You see, Alvarez was involved for quite a while. He left the service in '69, But he even went back to the Soviet embassy in '71. And remember, Oswald worked there too for a time, back in '62. And there's also a mention of someone called LITEMPTY, who was also involved in watching the limited base house.
Yeah.
Taking pictures, and he signed a secrecy agreement. I mean, when you look at all this, you see just how closely they were watching the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. So this brings us back to our main question: what were the government hiding? Were they watching Oswald in Mexico City? And if they were, what did they find out that they kept secret until now?
Well, I think the constant surveillance of the Soviet embassy and the fact that they might have had pictures of Oswald there shows that that intelligence agencies were really interested in this place, and it was kept out of the public eye until these documents were released. I mean, think about it. They were watching people and places that later on became really important to the whole JFK story, to the assassination and the details about the base houses and the code names and how long these operations were going on. It gives us a look into the world of Cold War spying, stuff that they really wanted to keep secret. And for you, the listener, it shows how sensitive all this was, these operations, and how they might be connected to the assassination, something the government probably didn't want to admit to.
Now, let's change gears a bit. We also have this really interesting memo from the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations, the HSCA, dated November 14, 1977. And this was when they were investigating both the assassinations of President Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And they were particularly interested in getting information from Portugal, the UK, and Mexico about James Earl Ray, King's assassin. But what really stands out is their request for help from overseas, quote, stations, end quote.
Yeah, it says in the memo that these stations overseas, they were asked for advice or assistance, and they were expected to, quote, cooperate fully, end quote, with the HSCA's chief counsel, G. Robert Blakey, and the committee. This just goes to show that the HSCA, they knew that there might be important pieces of information out there in these international intelligence posts, and that they needed people on the ground, with local knowledge to help them with their investigation, into both assassinations.
But then there's this instruction, and it's pretty specific, and for you, the listeners, pretty telling too. It says, quote, stations expected to provide embassy best advice if solicited, but requested to avoid involving station officers in negotiations, even in their cover capacities, end quote. I mean, why would a committee from Congress, investigating the assassination of a president, why would they need to tell intelligence stations to not involve their own officers in discussions with them? I mean, doesn't that sound like they were worried about something being exposed or someone trying to block them?
Yeah, that instruction does kind of set off some alarm bells about what the government might have been trying to hide. It really suggests that maybe the HSCA or maybe someone in the intelligence community, someone who knew about these sensitive issues, that they were worried about certain people or operations being exposed. If station officers, if they got involved in direct talks with the committee, this could mean there were some secret activities going on, or some covert relationships, or some information that they really didn't want to share, even with a congressional inquiry into something as huge as this. So it makes you think, what exactly was so sensitive that they had to keep their own people from talking directly to the HSCA? What were they so afraid of the committee finding out?
It's becoming pretty clear that these documents, they're showing us that there was a real effort to keep some things hidden. And we also have this memo from September 20, 1960, that talks about something called, quote, Escalade, end quote, which was a, quote, audio operation against the new China news agency in Havana, end quote. I mean, it sounds like a spy movie.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So the memo, it describes how the Havana station, they set up an office in the El Medico building, and this building was right next to the new China news agency. They even got permission from the ambassador's wife to put in audio surveillance on the NCNA office, and this involved secretly installing microphones and tape recorders. And then they found 2 more rooms that they thought might have had NCNA communication equipment. So they sent in a 3-man team from the Technical Services Division, the TSD. For you, the listener, the TSD was likely a special unit that handled covert technical stuff. They sent them in to install more, sophisticated equipment.
They were really stepping things up. But as it often happens with secret operations like this, it looks like they got caught. The memo says that Cuban authorities they found the operation, arrested the TSD technicians, and then they let them go and debriefed them. So for you, the listener, what does this Havana operation tell us about what the government might have been hiding when it comes to JFK's assassination?
Well, Escalade. It really shows that U.S. intelligence, they were definitely willing to do covert surveillance in other countries, even if it meant a risk of being caught and possibly causing diplomatic problems. So this makes you wonder, were there other secret operations like this that were focused on people or groups that were somehow connected to the JFK assassination? Maybe in other places too, like Mexico, where Oswald spent some time. If there were any operations like that, the records would be they'd be top secret, and they could probably tell us a lot more about the assassination, all the intelligence activities happening back then, stuff the government would probably prefer to keep under wraps.
And lastly, we have a short but really interesting mention of something called, quote, FIOP, end quote, which stands for Federación Interamericana de Organizaciones de Periodistas Profesionales. In English, that's the Inter-American Federation of Working Newspapermen's Organizations, and this group was having a seminar in Mexico City back in November. But here's the important part for you, listener. The document, it says, and I quote, FIOP is a Cubark-influenced organization. Contact is maintained with its Inter-American rep in Panama and its co-chairman in Washington, both of whom are covert associates, end quote. And then it says they want to track down information on the people who attended the seminar. So what exactly is Cubark, and what does it mean for a media organization to be, quote, influenced, end quote, by it with these, quote, covert associates, end quote?
Well, Cubark, it was a code name for the CIA headquarters at Camp Peary in Virginia. A really secretive place where they trained people for covert operations. They taught them all the tricks of the trade. So for you, the listener, to say that FIOP was, quote, Cubark influenced, end quote, it means that the CIA was probably involved in shaping this organization, maybe even controlling it, most likely to gather intelligence or maybe for propaganda. And the fact that they were in touch with these covert associates and FIOP, and they want to know who went to their seminar. Well, it just shows you how far intelligence agencies were willing to go, to get inside media organizations and maybe even manipulate them, even in other countries, to get what they wanted. This raises some big questions for you about how much influence the government had back then and how they gathered information. I mean, were there other organizations that seemed independent, but were actually being controlled by the government? And were they used for secret purposes, maybe even connected to the JFK assassination?
So let's put it all together. We've gone through these documents, these newly released documents, and we found some really interesting pieces of the puzzle. We still have the mystery of HMMA and the sensitive information it probably represents. We saw the details about them watching the Soviet embassy in Mexico City and maybe even having pictures of Oswald there before the assassination, which, makes you wonder what they knew about him and what they decided to keep secret. And then there's the HSCA memo and their worry about station officers getting involved, which, could mean that there were secret operations or people they were protecting. And the Escalade thing in Havana, it showed that they were definitely willing to take risks with, secret surveillance in other countries. And then there's FIOP and how it was, quote, Cubark influenced, end quote, which shows that the government might have been pulling the strings, of media organizations. I mean, it all points to a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely. These documents, they don't give us all the answers to all the questions about JFK's assassination, but they do show that the government was definitely keeping things from us about intelligence work and things they were sensitive about with Congress asking questions and covert operations in countries that are, directly related to the assassination. And for you, the listener, the fact that these details were in documents that were hidden for so long, I mean, it shows that there was a lot the government just didn't want us to know.
It really makes you think, right? I mean, these new pieces of the puzzle, they're fascinating, but they just lead to more questions about what else might still be hidden. What other secrets are still locked away in those government archives? The ones that hold the story of this huge turning point in American history. I mean, what other connections are waiting to be discovered as more information comes out? Stuff that could change how we think about about the JFK assassination. It's something to think about, and it should make us really look at the stories we've been told, and be open to the idea that that maybe, just maybe, we don't know the whole story yet.